I'm here today with my dear friend, mentor, Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's a best-selling author, lecturer, teacher, inspirational guru to one and all, and I'm honored and privileged to have him here with us today. So, Joe, the work you do was inspired by your own miraculous healing after a devastating bicycle accident. Can you tell us just a little bit about that accident?
I actually never planned on doing any of this. And I think for some of us to wake up, we need a wake-up call. And in 1986, I got the call. I was in a triathlon in Palm Springs, and I was on the biking portion of the race. And I was passing two cyclists on the corner, and there was a police officer waving me on like this to make the turn. And he was pointing at me, and I kind of locked in on him, and he was giving me specific instructions to pass these two bikers. The problem was he had his back to the oncoming traffic. He wasn't looking to see if there was traffic coming. So when I made the turn, there was an SUV going about 55 miles an hour and basically ran me over. And so I wound up breaking 6 vertebrae in my spine. And when you land really hard on your back or on your butt, the blocks of vertebrae compress. And if the force is strong enough, they compress and fracture the vertebrae. So when I saw the scans and the x-rays, I knew exactly what the doctors were going to say, that I needed a radical surgery. Surgery entailed cutting off the back parts of my vertebrae from the base of my neck to the base of my spine. It's called the Harrington rod surgery. And I think if it was anybody else and I saw a patient with something similar, I probably would have said, you need the surgery, but this was me. And so I wound up getting 4 opinions from 4 of the leading surgeons in Southern California, and they all said you need Harrington rod surgery. They cut off the back parts of those vertebrae. They screw in these stainless steel rods. When they drill the rods into the spine, the force of the drill pulls the spinal column off the spinal cord. And they take bone fragments from your hip and they paste it up. And so after 4 opinions, I decided against the surgery. And I just said, look, I'm willing to step into the unknown. And I'm not going anywhere, I'm not doing anything, I'm basically laying face down. And I said, I'm going to make contact with this intelligence that's giving me life. I'm going to take time and pay attention. And when I feel good about the template or design that I'm giving it, I'm going to surrender my creation to a greater mind and allow it to do the healing, because it could heal much better than I can. And then the second thing I said was, I'm not going to let any thought slip by my awareness that I don't want to experience. Sounds really easy, but when you're in crisis and trauma, we tend to focus on what we don't want to have happen instead of what we do want to have happen. And I think that's because of the hormones of stress. I think stress causes us to select the worst case scenario in our lives and be prepared for that event, because anything less means a better chance of surviving. So I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted it to do. I couldn't really stay present, because I would start off recreating my spine, and then I'd think about living in a wheelchair, or should I sell my home, and I'd have to stop and start all over again. And for 6 weeks I went through a dark night of the soul. But at the end of about 6 weeks, I all of a sudden started to notice that it was getting easier. And what took me 3 hours to do in one day, in a meditation, I was able to do in 45 minutes. I was able to go through the whole entire thing. Well, the show is called Firing and Wiring, or Rewiring Yourself, or rewiring. The concept of rewiring really means to actually cause circuits in your brain to form new connections. And if you keep revisiting those connections, you produce a new level of mind. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was rewiring me. I was actually creating a new level of mind. And as I fired and wired, the hardware circuits in my brain became a software program. It got easier. And I started to notice at that point some very significant changes in my body, pain levels, numbness, motor function. And the moment I was able to correlate the changes I made inside of me with the effect that was being produced outside of me, instead of doing it in frustration and impatience and in dread and desperation, I got excited. I was doing it in joy and inspiration. I was looking forward to the whole thing. And that's when my body really started to change, and I knew in that moment that I was healing. And so basically, I said to this intelligence that is giving me life, which is a consciousness, which is an awareness and pays attention, if I'm ever able to walk again, I'll make a deal with you right now. I'll spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and studying mind over matter. And pretty much that's what I've been doing since 1986.
In your latest book, You Are the Placebo, you explain how it's possible to heal by thought alone. Can you elaborate on what this placebo effect is?
I think to heal by thought alone, we have to demystify the process. So let's answer the question on two levels, okay? Let's answer it in terms of the placebo, and then let's answer it in terms of what we can teach people in order to do that, okay? So if you think about the placebo, how is it that you can give someone a sugar pill, a saline injection, or perform some false surgery or treatment? And a certain percentage of those people will accept, believe, and surrender to the thought that they're getting the real substance or treatment. Without any analysis, they begin to program their autonomic nervous system to make their own pharmacy of chemicals that matches the exact chemical or treatment they think they're getting. Now, was it the inert substance, the placebo, that was doing the healing? Or was it the thought that was doing the healing? So there are numerous cases in science that show that between 10% and 100% of certain studies that are placebo-based triple-blind studies, people heal by thought alone all the time. So here's the question. Do you need the inert substance to do the healing? Or if you understand the science and mechanics of how the placebo works, can you teach people, instead of putting their faith and belief in some exogenous substance, something outside of them, like a pill, something known, can you begin to put your faith and belief in yourself and begin to select an unknown in the quantum field, a new possibility that already exists, and do the exact same thing you did with the placebo, but believe in a future and allow your body to begin to respond to a new mind? And the answer to the question is yes, because we've measured it enough times in our studies with the brain. So that's point number one. The second point that is important to understand is that people only accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts that are equal to their emotional state. They'll never accept, believe, and surrender to any other thoughts that are not equal to their emotional state. So if you get a diagnosis and the first emotion you feel after the diagnosis is fear or sadness, you can think positively all you want. With 5%, now this is science, 5% of your conscious mind. But who you are by the time you're 35 years old is a subconscious program of beliefs, perceptions, attitudes, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, and behaviors. So then the person gets the diagnosis, they're feeling fear. Thoughts are the language of the brain, feelings are the language of the body. They're thinking positively with the 5% of their conscious mind, but they're feeling fear. And they could do that all they want, but it's never going to get beyond their analytical mind and begin to have an effect on the body. So mind and body are working in opposition. That means also then that if you can change a person's emotional state to gratitude, to inspiration, to hope, to love, that means that they'll accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to that emotional state, and they'll begin to program their autonomic nervous system into a different pharmacy of chemicals. Now, let's just make this very clear now. In placebo studies, 81% of people who have depression, if they're in a placebo study, and 81% of those people who are taking the placebo actually respond as well to the placebo as they would to an antidepressant. 81%, that's a pretty high study. What that means is they're making their own pharmacy of antidepressants right within them. The nervous system is the greatest pharmacist in the world. So what's the relevance, the significance of that? The significance is really simple. When people begin to change their emotional state, they begin to alter who they are. It may take more than one attempt at this, because in that placebo study, they took the placebo for 6 to 8 weeks. Now the pill represented the possibility of them getting well, their thought. When they start looking forward to or anticipating getting better and they feel inspired, When you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, you're moving into a new state of being. Now the brain and body are no longer living in the past. The brain and body are living in the future, in the present moment, and they're beginning to produce substantial neurological, biological, and genetic changes in their body. But the placebo study for depression, that person took the pill for 6 to 8 weeks, which means you may actually have to change your state of being for 6 to 8 weeks before you begin to see the change. So I don't want this to be a panacea where you do it once and you're better. Our students have healed themselves of very significant, very almost predestined genetic conditions that medical science had no solution for. Not just one student with one condition, but other students with the same condition. Now we're seeing a trend. But it took them, some of those people, 2 years to do it by thought alone. So they wanted it more than their sleep. They wanted it more than their pain. They wanted it more than their social interactions or social engagements. They wanted it more than breakfast. To them, it was the most important thing. So every single day, they took the placebo by thought alone. And by doing that, over time, they were able to turn the battleship around. So it takes developing the skill. It takes the science of understanding how it works. It takes changing a belief or perception that you have about yourself and your life. And it's going to take you feeling a little bit uncomfortable in the process of doing it. But to heal by thought alone means that you have to get to the point where you literally are thought alone. That's when you begin to see the significant changes.
Right. So now what was the difference between the group that took 2 years and did you say that the 6-week, 8-week group started to see the changes relatively early as they approached that benchmark there, that 6 to 8 weeks? Was it just one group? Could it be like people just being stubborn or just too connected to their old ways and having a harder time? Because like our journeys aren't all the same,
Right.
so it may take some people longer than others. Or is that
there's no theory or no scientific proof that says that you can change in 21 days. There's just too many variables. For example, we have people in our work that have been physically abused as children. We have people that have been violently or sexually abused as young adults. We have people have experienced traumas in their lives, shocking events that have branded them neurologically and emotionally. We have people that have reached such a low level of emotional state that it requires more attention and more effort. But so there are too many variables. You have a person's attention span, how long they actually put aside for their day to change, their skill set in which they're able to do it, what their past is, whether they can actually control their mind. So there's a lot of variables. But we're seeing now a community of people that are able to begin to do this in a more consistent level. So it's difficult for us to say what the exact time frame will be because your personality creates your personal reality, right? And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So when a person begins to change their thoughts, change their behaviors, and change their emotions, the more they go back to the same thoughts, the same behaviors, and the same emotions, the more they return back to their same personalities. So we know that when we get people to retreat from their lives for a period of time and forget about their life, their personal reality, they're able to produce more significant changes. So I don't think there's a direct correlation between time and change.
in your book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, you explain that in order to change something in our life, we have to change the energy around it. What do you mean by that?
Wow, this is a fabulous question because I believe that when you change your energy, you change your life. Now, let's demystify that process because for the most part, your brain is organized to reflect everything you know in your life. Your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to date. Feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you can remember experiences better because you can remember how they feel. So if you're feeling the same way every single day, that really means nothing new is happening in your life. And if those feelings are driving certain thoughts and emotions are a record of the past, then most people are thinking in the past. So their biology then literally is rooted in the past. So you can't create a new future if your brain and body are living in the past. So then most people define themselves as a narrative or a story based on the past. Hey, I'm this person, I've done these things, I lived in these places, I've owned these things, I know these people. And then you say, oh, well, I know those people, I've been to those places, I've done those things. And when you have a similar experience, you share similar emotions. And if you share similar emotions, emotions are energy. So then we begin to create energetic bonds with things and people in our life. And the problem is that 70% of the time, most people are living by the hormones of stress. And stress is when your brain and body is knocked out of balance. The emotions of stress are anger, aggression, frustration, hatred, judgment, envy, jealousy, fear, anxiety, worry, depression, guilt, shame, unworthiness, hopelessness. They're all created by the hormones of stress. Psychology calls those normal states of consciousness. Those are altered states of consciousness. They're all good for the short term, but not for the long term. The problem with the hormones of stress is that the very rush of chemicals gives the body a rush of energy. So then we use the people and problems and conditions in our life to reaffirm the addiction of the rush of those chemicals. So then we use our best friend to reaffirm our addiction to suffering. We use our boss to reaffirm our addiction to judgment. We use our enemy to reaffirm our addiction to hatred. We use Facebook to reaffirm our addiction to insecurity. We're not conscious that we're doing that, but we're using these things in our external life, and we begin to develop energetic bonds that exist beyond space and time, like the way two atoms of oxygen share information. They're sharing energy, they're sharing electrons. We do the exact same thing in our life. So every person, everything, every place that you've experienced in your life, you have an emotion that's correlated with it, which means you have an energy signature that's interacting in your environment. So we know then that when people get caught in these patterns, they'll tell a story about their past to say, I am this way because of these events. For the most part, they're in the past. What we do know is that when you combine a clear intention, instead of being defined by a memory of the past, you're going to be defined by a vision of the future. And well, we were just talking just 15, 20 minutes ago about a vision. And I saw your energy change, and you got excited. The moment you selected that potential and you started talking about a dream, you were experiencing that future in the present moment, and all of a sudden, you can't live in the emotions of survival. You're starting to feel joy, you're starting to feel inspired, you're starting to feel a gratitude, you're starting to feel optimistic. And when you combine a clear intention and elevated emotion, you're literally taking your biology out of the past, and now you're living in that future biologically in the present moment. Turns out the effects of that is that you begin to change your brain to look like the experience has already occurred. The elevated emotion begins to signal new genes that make new proteins to prepare your body for the event. Now you're no longer living in your past, you're living in that future reality in the present moment. Now, our research shows over and over again, and we've done 7 advanced workshops where we measure all these changes in people. When you're living by the hormones of stress, you're literally drawing from this invisible field of energy around your body, and you're turning it into chemistry. Whether you're angry or frustrated, or you're fighting or flighting, whether you're guilty and shameful or digesting a steak, or whether you're over-sexual, you are drawing from energy and turning it into chemistry. These are the survival centers. When people begin to open their heart, and the emotions of gratitude, the emotions of care, compassion, kindness, joy, love. If you teach people how to get and lock into this creative center, and as they begin to create that energy, the field around their body, now this is science, the magnetic field around their body can be 9 meters wide. Now they're more energy and less matter. They're more wave and less particle. Now, that's a magnetic field. But what is the carrier of that magnetic field? In other words, all frequency carries information. Radio waves carry information. Your cell phone waves carry information. All frequency carries information. So now you have a person who's heart-centered, and they're broadcasting a magnetic signature. The carrier of that is magnetism, but the intention is the information. So now, thoughts are the electrical charge in the quantum field, and feelings are the magnetic charge. So then when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, now you're broadcasting a new electromagnetic energy into the field. And whatever you broadcast into the field is your experiment with destiny. So then it's not enough to just broadcast it once. It's got to become so familiar to you that your energy now is connected to a future, and your body is going to be drawn to that event. And we now know that over and over again, that clear intention with an elevated emotion begins to produce an effect on matter.
And don't I know it? That's why I love your work so much, Joe. It's so right on, and it's true, and you're absolutely right, and you witnessed it a minute ago with me, and
it's that easy.
It's that easy once you understand it, you know.
Yeah.
It's
so here's a great example. I was driving over here, and I had to do a phone call, and I'm writing a blog about what this project we're going to be doing at the end of the year with our students, a global coherence project to raise the energy of the entire planet. It's possible. And he was having difficulty understanding coherence, and I said, Eric, imagine dropping a pebble in water. When people are able to get heart-centered and stay there, the longer they stay there, the more the waves ripple out. If you only stay there for 1 second, you only drop one pebble, and the field dissipates. But if you're able to keep dropping that pebble over and over again, and you're able to sustain that heart coherence, you got a big wave that's coming out. You can see it. But that's the wave. But what's the information carried on the wave? Your intention. So then, if your intention, when you're in that heart-centered place, you can't be selfish in that place. It's impossible to be selfish. These are the centers that are about self. You're selfless. You want to contribute. You want to give. You want to make a difference. And so we've done research in our events where we have taken 550 people in a room. We've taken 45 to 50 people in the front of the room wearing heart rate monitors. Now, when you're frustrated and when you're impatient, your heart beats differently than when you're in love and you're in gratitude. So you have 500 people now in the remainder of the room getting heart-centered, cultivating an elevated emotion, resting their attention in that center, and broadcasting a signature into the field of love, with the intention for the greatest good of the people sitting in the front of the room who are wearing the HRV monitors. At the exact same time, at the exact same day, in the exact same meditation, 90% of those people in 1 second move into heart coherence. Now, that's something that's happening in a non-local phenomenon. It's not happening, right, randomly. There's a lock-in that takes place. So the magnetic field is the energy, but the intention is the greater good for the people sitting in the front of the room. Now, let's scale that to a larger scale.
Right.
What if you had thousands of people doing the same thing for people in Syria, for people in Iraq, for people that are suffering in Sudan? What if there was a very specific intention behind a heart-centered emotion? What type of effects could we begin to see globally? And I think that's where we're going.
Right.